كبرات تخطاتل تستيت نايلو معلالنا بزعباتي زكايدلو ركباتن مقصال حسابات نايتي اب سدت منغستي ممسرات دبل كوينو نايلو ميغاشانا حامد سليمانيو ازي علالنا مس حامد سليمان بقانقا انجليشينا هنغبرو نابتو بزعباك خيدي. First of all, thank you so much, Hamid Salman, for this opportunity. And as I said, it's going to be in English for your preferences. And my first approach to this discussion or chat, let's say about it, it's going to be about, I'd like you to introduce yourself to our audience. Let's talk about you, a little brief introduction about yourself.
Well, thank you very much, Tegisti, for having me, inviting me to this debate around the Eritrean government in exile that is initiated by activists and politicians. My name is Hamid Salman, and I was born in Afabat and raised in Karan, and studied partly in Eritrea and partly in Sudan, and now I'm living in Germany.
Thank you, Hamid, for this opportunity, and we are glad to have you in our Setit program, addressing issues of general concern about Eritrea. And as I said, this topic is going to be about the government in exile, the concept and how it has developed so far. And as you know, the GIE, or the government in exile national task force, has so far conducted over 7 meetings, inviting individuals like yourself and others who they believe that are very influential in the public opinion. And you were in one of those meetings, and if I recall it correctly, and they have so far this approach or this idea had evolved since February, and in March 17 they have their first task force meeting. And as I said earlier, they have been doing a couple or many meeting with the Eritrean people around their diaspora community. So far, you are one of those invited guests to their meeting. I just want to ask or start this conversation with you. How does it evolve for you since you heard about the government in exile?
Yeah, thank you. It's a very good question. I was exposed to the government in exile, the initiative, through many mediums, especially the social media. But my first impression of the government in exile, I mean the initiative itself, was not very good, because I have heard that it was somehow like one-eyed or sectarian people who has been conducting this initiative in order to make the groundwork for the government in exile and to dominate it. That was the first impression I have got through other people and also through the social media. But out of the sudden, I was invited to one of the meetings that organized by the initiators of the idea of government in exile, and I came to know the people personally, very trusted people, people tested in their national agenda, like Saleh Gadi, Saleh Yunus, and Dr. Almaz, people that I know very well, and I am sure that these people cannot be part of any sectarian or one-eyed or hegemonic initiatives. After that, I started to see the necessity of the government in exile for Eritreans. I was thinking, do we really need a government in exile at this time, or it's too late, or it's too earlier? That is how I come to know about the initiative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have it since you knew or you were aware of this initiative of the government in exile and the work they have been doing, and beside your misconception you had earlier, as you said, have you changed your opinion about the idea of government in exile and its need to be established or go through that route at this moment?
Yes, my idea was the image I got was first impression on the initiative itself, not in the idea of government in exile. Mm-hmm. But like I said before, it has been changed, and now I am in full support of the concept to form a government in exile for the Eritrean people, because I believe that we need it. We need it, yeah, due to the situation in our country. Mm-hmm. We might disagree on some details, like how we would form the government, in the way, the mechanism to form the government, but in the idea itself, I am in full support of the initiative. Yeah.
Okay, as you were saying, you're in full support and you are standing with the idea of government in exile, as you said, it is kind of a necessity at this moment for the Eritrean people. But having said that, is there any pros and cons that you would like to point out so that it can help the national task force or the Eritrean in exile task force to address? Do you think there are pros and cons of having a government in exile?
Okay, in terms of pros and cons, I will be using the terms advantages and the disadvantages. Mm-hmm. I see that there is many advantages in forming a government in exile for Eritrea in this juncture of our history. Mm-hmm. As for the disadvantages can be only a failure of the government itself, or an internal dispute.
That this the one established, you think it might fail?
No, not that it might fail, but if it has failed, like any human effort, mm-hmm. this could be could fire back. This is only the disadvantage that is I think potential in the efforts to form a government in exile. But there is many advantages in having the government in exile. For example, if we look at if we look back at our history, there was 2 times when government in exile was supposed to be formed, but it was not. The first time was when Haile Selassie dismantled the Eritrean Federation and annexed Eritrea by force to Eritrea. At that time, I think it was good for the Eritrean people to form, especially the officials, the politicians who have left the country, was supposed to form government in exile. The second time is 2001, when half of the government was imprisoned. This is somehow, it could be translated to a coup. It's a coup. So it was supposed to have an idea. Those who have left Eritrea, those who have fled, should have formed government in exile, but this did not happen. Now, the same necessity to have government in exile is existence at this time. If we look at the geopolitical developments in our region, since the rapprochement between Eritrea and Ethiopia, all the signs that are sent by the two parties, Abiy Ahmed and Isaias Afwerki, all of concern to the Eritrean people in terms of the territorial integrity, independence, and statehood of Eritrea, because Isaias Afwerki himself has said in many instances, he said that Ethiopia and Eritrea are one thing. That means something bad is coming for Eritrea. So if we form a government in exile, at least this government in exile could stand before the international law as a recognized government to defend the independence of Eritrea in times of need. The other advantages is the government in exile can provide protection to the Eritrean nationals outside the country. Add to that, the Eritrean people has been dispersed in many countries, too much countries, all the world. So it's very necessary also to have their say in a government, and it's possible to have their say on their and elect their representatives only abroad, not inside. So government in exile is have many advantages, and also there is possibility that the government in exile itself can form an authority, and with this authority it can lead to change the in situ government and take it out and install a government that is elected by the Eritrean people.
Okay, if I got it correctly, basically the only disadvantage that you mentioned is the possibility of failure. If I got it correctly, what you were trying to say, the failure not of the government itself that would be created or established, but the failure of establishing that government in exile. Is that correct? Is that what you were trying to say?
Both. I think both will be disadvantaged.
Yeah.
If we attempted to form a government in exile and we failed to form it, this is a big disadvantage, because next attempts will take 10 years or so.
So I will also, that point.
Yes.
The fact that you're saying there is a possibility we might fail or establishing a government in exile, Eritrean government in exile. That's what you're saying. And what do you think would be the reason for this government exile attempt, or the national task force attempt to create a government in exile will fail? What would be the reason for it to fail? And what would be the remedy you would suggest for them to do?
Yes, the failure in itself is only a possibility, a minimal possibility. But if happened, what I mean is, if happened, it will damage the idea of government in exile. The reasons why it could fail, whether the government after forming it or before forming it, I think due to inactiveness of the people, due to if the people did not accept the idea and did not interact with it, and if the government failed to create a broad support base for the initiative, failure can happen. So to avoid this, they need the people who are responsible for the initiative should exert great effort to secure that the government in exile is in place and successful and having all the support of the Eritrean people, the diverse Eritrean people. I mean, like, it's not only the possibility that Eritrean government in exile, but Eritrean government in exile that every Eritrean can see their aspirations and their interests and their rights mirrored in that government.
Hamid, I will right now. I'll ask you a very personal question, which is, are you part of any political organization in the Eritrean movements? If so, do you believe your organization or your political party would be joining or supporting the idea of government in exile?
Indeed, I am a member of the Eritrean Federalist Democratic Party. It's one of the Eritrean political parties in exile. Mm-hmm. And I cannot decide for the party at this moment, because in order to take a step forward on decide to join a government in exile, the party institutions should take some measures to discuss the idea, its pros and cons, like you said. Mm-hmm. And after that, the party can decide whether we join this efforts or not. But like I said before, I strongly support the idea of government in exile.
And I would assume, since you were invited to this as an influencer, I mean, to their task force for the government of establishing a government in exile, I would assume the purpose is for them to be a spokesperson. I mean, would you be able to promote the idea of government in exile to your organization or your party, the Federalist Party?
Sure, I will be in support of the idea, but the party, at the end of the day, the party decides. I am one person. I can support the idea within the party, but I cannot decide.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Still, we're going to talk about the role of opposition parties and in relation to the government in exile that we're talking about. Do you think the government in exile initiative differs or is different from the initiative including the efforts of opposition parties to resolve political and governance issue in Eritrea?
I think it differs in many ways, because forming a government in exile is totally different than having an opposition outside the country. Forming a government, yeah.
But sorry to interrupt you, but at the same time, opposition parties, they are planning to replace the existing government or the system in Eritrea. So in a way, we are talking about the same issue, making sure there is a different government in Eritrea. So where do they differ, despite the fact that they have an interest?
Okay. Every Eritrean person have the intention to overthrow the Eritrean government, starting from person. Mm-hmm. Then we go to the parties, organizations are trying also the same objective, and the government in exile will be trying the same objective. But the difference is not in the idea of attempting to overthrow the government in Eritrea, but the form of government in exile is different than political parties. Political parties They have no authority. They don't require other countries to give them recognition. But government in exile, after forming it, mostly it gets support from other countries. There is no recognition of government in the international law. There is only recognition for the state. Now we have the groundwork, the foundation is already there. Eritrea is a state recognized by the international law. What remaining is that we form a government, and this government, we look for other government to give us, other member states of the United States to give recognition to the government in exile. It is the attitude of individual states and member states of the United Nations to give their recognition to whether to the government in place in situ in Eritrea, or to give it also to the government in exile. So there is big difference between opposition groups resisting the current dictatorial regime in Eritrea and forming a government in exile. Government in exile is a big leap forward toward replacing the government in Eritrea.
In your opinion, what do you think will be the most challenging part of this effort of establishing government in exile?
The most challenging part will be two things. The first is the support of the Eritrean people, participation of the Eritrean people of diverse nationalities, diverse cultures, and diverse ethnicities. If they secure to make sure that the people of Eritrea gets the idea and the benefits of having a government in exile, and the government in exile gets a broad base of support, this is one advantage, one good thing that will make the government in exile a success. The other thing is recognition of other countries. It is necessary that the government in exile needs recognition of other countries, at least 1, 2, 3 countries. If one country is able to recognize the Eritrean government in exile, this will secure a headquarters for the government. The second thing, it will secure some financial support for the efforts of the government in exile, and from there, the government in exile can achieve the goals and the objectives that it has set forward.
My final question for you probably had answered part of it already, but what I would like to ask you, what needs to be done? How can the efforts of the government in exile task force be successful? What do you think they need to do?
Yes, I think my idea might be a little bit different than the idea that is set forward by the initiators of the idea. They are thinking of having of dividing the people into 4 blocks. Mm-hmm. 4 blocks means they make one block for the ELF and the other block for the EPLF and so on. I think instead of doing this, for the government in exile to be successful and broad-based and publicly supported, the idea of having general elections, allowing the people who are outside Eritrea, I suppose that almost half of the Eritrean people is outside Eritrea. There is no census, but I suppose that a greater portion of the Eritrean people is in exile. So if it's general elections for the Eritrean people to elect their representatives to form the government in exile, whether the parliament or the cabinet or the head of state, all this, if they come from as a result of direct voting, it will be much stronger, it will be much legitimate, and it will get much support. This is the idea that is now, due to the technological development, is possible. They can do the national elections outside Eritrea. The voting systems, that is electronic voting systems, they can employ these systems, and it will be possible for them to have elections, direct voting of the people without dividing them into 4 or 3 blocks. Because if they do, the blocks will enter into the body of the government, and after that, within the government, they will create problems, and there will be competence. That means not competence by voice, but competence by connections inside the government. And this will make dispute and might lead to failure. For this reason, I see it's better to have direct elections to form the government in exile.
Those are the questions I have for you, Hamid Salman. If you have anything you would like to add, final comments for you or word.
I would like only to thank you, Tegisti, and thank also your audience, the audience of your channel, Setit. And I would like also to wish good for the people who are initiating the government in exile. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Hamid Salman, for this opportunity. We are glad to have you, and we look forward to meet with you again on another topic, or when this issue of government in exile develops in its phase. As we know, so far they are on the consultation and outreach phase of their program. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
حمد سليمان كوينو أرستنا نتي حجز أصل دلو أرستناي ممسرات منجستي أبسد الزبل ذات كورينيرو يا أنيلنا بخال مدب أبكال معلتسك عن رخب كلهم سلام مشت ويبرهم معلتي.